Hello, and welcome to Shelf Life, presented by the Virginia Festival of the Book. I'm Sarah Lawson, Associate Director of the Virginia Center for the Book, a program of Virginia Humanities. Thanks for joining us. A couple notes before I hand the program over to our speakers. Please share your questions using the Q&A tab on Zoom or add your questions on Facebook. This event has optional closed captioning, which you can turn on and customize at the bottom of your Zoom window at any time. If you haven't already read today's books, we hope you will. For details about how to buy them from a local bookseller or check out copies from your library, visit vabook.org, where you can also watch past events and explore our schedule of upcoming virtual events. While you're there, please consider making a donation to support the festival's ongoing work at vabook.org/give. Now, I'm pleased to introduce today's speakers. Yvonne Battle-Felton, author of Remembered, is an American writer living in the UK. Her writing has been published in literary journals and anthologies. Remembered was longlisted for the 2019 Women's Prize for Fiction and shortlisted for the 2020 Jalak Prize. Welcome, Yvonne. Keisha Bush, author of No Heaven for Good Boys, was born in Boston. She has received fellowships from the LMCC Workspace Residency, Tyrone Guthrie Center, Maulana Neff, VCCA, and Vermont Studio Center. Her work has also appeared in LitHub, The Rumpus, and Electric Lit. Welcome, Keisha. And Melanie S. Hatter, author of Malawi Sisters, is an award-winning author of 2 novels and 1 short story collection. Selected by Edwidge Dandicott, Malawi Sisters won the inaugural Kimbilio National Fiction Prize. Yvonne, Keisha, Melanie, thank you all for joining us. Please tell us more about your work.
Thank you so much for having us, and thank you everyone for joining in and watching us live, or whether you watch us later. It's such an honor to be sitting here and and to be talking with these fabulous writers about their books and their stories and asking insider questions to some of the deep burning questions. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Melanie, to start us off. But I just wanted to say thank you so much. I'm so looking forward to this.
Absolutely, me too.
Yeah, this is pretty exciting. You guys are rock star writers, so I feel pretty honored to be here with both of you. So yeah, I'm gonna just open things up a little bit, read from my latest novel, Malawi Sisters. And this book is about a family that's dealing with the death of a young woman who was shot, Black woman who was shot by a white man, and how the family sort of deals with the aftermath of that, the grief and just the trauma that they experience. One of the things that connects all our books is sort of the issue of family and family ties. And so I wanted to share a little piece that gives us a little insight into this particular family, the Walker family. Ghana parked on the street and walked by her sister's Mercedes, already in the driveway behind her parents' cars. Chaos was oozing from the house. The front door was ajar and the voices inside were loud and angry, her mother's voice shaking the walls. Ghana closed the door behind her and found her mother, father, and Kenya in the kitchen. You never listen. Bet poked the air with pointed fingers. You never listen to anyone. People calling here, asking personal questions, all because you don't have any control. Her father stood by the refrigerator, his mouth pursed in a tense line, watching her mother with a loathing Ghana had never seen before, and it frightened her. Kenya was positioned close to her mother, her hands outstretched but not touching, her face begging for peace. Mama, please stop. Please, Mama, please stop. Kenya repeated these words like a quiet mantra their mother didn't seem to hear. I'm tired of all of you, Bet said, sweeping her hand in a wide circle. Ghana was dumbfounded. This was not her family, she thought. They didn't fight like this. She couldn't remember her parents fighting, storming through the house, shouting at one another. No, it never happened that way. Yet it did. She just didn't want to remember. These disputes were never real brawls. Instead, a tense silence filled the house, and Daddy would disappear while Mama began raging. The girls would listen silently while their mother thundered through the house, screaming insults at their father, who was nowhere around to hear. Or worse, she directed her anger at them, Frustrated, they were making too much noise, complaining she couldn't work, couldn't focus. They cowered from their mother's fury, her hostility. Just be quiet, Mama would scream. Ghana, small in Kenya's room, arms around Malawi while their mother raged on like thunder they hoped would eventually pass. Kenya, humming, trying to distract them with a song their father used to sing to them, trying to remember the words and throwing out a word or two. When I wake up in the morning, love, until Ghana would remember a line. And something is heavy on my mind. And they would all sing, then I look at you and the world's all right with me. Quietly, while their mother whirled and roared, their tiny voices tuning out the disturbance, pretending everything was fine. A lovely day. No one understands, Mama would scream. No one. I can't do all this by myself. I just can't do it. Do what? Ghana was never clear on what her mother was so upset about. Being a mother to 3 girls, being a wife to an important judge. Her mother, the artist, it was just who she was, they reasoned, who she had always been, dramatic, emotional, uncontrolled. This is all your fault, she was screaming now, her face scrunched, her eyes almost closed, her fingers pointing toward her husband. You did this. You wanted to get away. She wanted to get away from you. You ruined her, treated her like she was the only child in the world, and it turned her against us. Enough. Ghana was startled by her father's voice, booming, strong, filling the kitchen, freezing her mother by the dishwasher. Everyone stared at him. I am done. His chest seemed to expand as he heaved in a breath. Done with you blaming me. This is not my fault. I am done. He didn't acknowledge his daughters, simply turned and pushed past his wife. The air continued to swirl and Ghana felt dizzy. Her mother was motionless, focused on the spot where her husband had been, as if in shock. Mama, Kenya said, moving gingerly closer, palms up, head cocked. Mama, come sit down. Ghana pulled a chair from the dining table and waited for her mother to move, but Bet continued to stand, now searching the floor as if she'd dropped an earring. Please come sit. Kenya patted the chair. A drink was in order, Ghana thought, but instead of liquor, she put on the kettle for tea, something to relax her mother. Bet finally moved, dropping heavily into the chair like a rock dropped from up high. Kenya quickly pulled out another chair, dragging it close to her mother, squeezing Bet's forearm. She looked at Ghana, but Ghana didn't know what to say or do. So she shrugged, feeling exhausted, and took a seat on the other side of the table. Kenya reached across and squeezed her fingers. Ghana squeezed back. Everything was crumbling. Her family, the world, everything. Thank you.
That was beautiful. I didn't even realize while you were doing it, I was holding my breath while you were reading, and then that was absolutely beautiful. So I guess I will jump in with Remembered. So, and I'll put this up. And Keisha, I love how you are putting up everyone's books. When I'm like, oh my goodness, y'all are great. So Remembered is the story of a mother whose son has been beaten by police in 1910 Philadelphia. It's for a crime he may or may not have committed. The book is historically influenced. It's set in 2 time periods. So one is 1840 to 1864 in America, and also 1910, which is the present of the novel. But throughout the book, Tempe is who is Spring's sister. She's her ghost, but she's also her sister. She loves her, and she's there to remind Spring of the things that she never talked about, the secrets that she holds, and to ultimately lead Edward home. For me, in writing it, I was really curious about how families might have reconnected after the emancipation. I was curious about how people might have healed or tried to heal or struggled to heal, and some of that healing that's still going on today, the legacy of slavery that we're living with. And of course, I was interested in the violence, the trauma that police can inflict on communities and on individuals. And I just wanted to explore that through fiction, because fiction for me, it's how I get to know people and places, and it's how I get to answer questions or explore them in ways that make sense to me. So it's set partially in Philadelphia, which is because that's where I was born, and I felt like I knew it in a way, but I don't know Philadelphia in the ways that I guess Philadelphia might know me, or the ways that like my grandmother and my family might have known me. So it gave me a chance to explore what that might be like to be in Philadelphia. It's also set in Maryland, which is because I lived in Maryland for 20 years. And so of course my next book is going to be set in New Jersey because I, also grew up in New Jersey. But I'm going to do it's a bit of time traveling, and we're going to be in 1862, and we're in Maryland. So there have been rumors about the emancipation coming. But imagine these same rumors and these same whispers of it are things that people had been hearing for years and hundreds of years and hoping for one day to be free. And so I wanted to explore what that might have been like for my characters to hear it yet again. Would they believe it? Maybe not. But one thing I also wanted was for my characters to have love. It was really important that no matter how they defined it, I wanted them to have love. So believe it or not, this is actually a bit of a love scene. And I say that because it doesn't always come through that that love, but it turns out I don't always need my glasses when I read. They're teaching me things every day. So only the porch is base. It has to be. Anyone fool enough to bound up the creaking wooden step, hop one-legged down a sagging porch, run around the shaky dinner table made up of splintering crates, and risk toppling tin plates and wooden bowls while yelling, "Sanctuary!" and skirting around a ring full of women who had spent hours baking, dusting, cleaning, and boiling, and now only wanted a minute to relax without someone underfoot, deserves to be free from being tagged. Fair is fair. You know the rules, Tempe announces. No hiding in the water. No hiding near the water, I add. No getting dirty, Tempe says. No getting anyone else dirty. No loud yelling, no roughhousing. What can we do? Watson, always grinning, asks. Boy, with all those teeth in your mouth at one time, how do you have room for questions? Tempe teases. Watson flinches. Tempe's going to count to 100. You all run and hide. We'll find you, I say. What if you don't find us before supper? Little Ivy asks. You won't eat, Tempe answers. We'll find you, and if not, I won't eat until we do. I smooth the sprinkling of tears off Ivy's cheeks. And if you reach sanctuary, Tempe pauses, winding her arms in wide, flourishing circles while I point to the porch. You win. Has anyone ever reached sanctuary? Watson asks. Tempe and I think it over. Nope. I close my eyes and hold a finger up as Tempe counts. 1, 2, 3. The heavy padding of careless feet gives the little ones away. One hides in a nearby tree. One scampers to the edge of the wood, turns and burrows beneath the canopy. 2 hide in tall grass on the side of the house. One heavy-footed one, probably Franklin, stomps behind the house. Another one hides underneath the tin wash tub. One shifts, one foot to the other. There's always a runner. Please, just go hide behind the house. I'm sweaty, and the thought of chasing one of them makes me hotter. What do you think they talk about in there? Tempe asks, somewhere between 25 and 29. Men. Why would they do that? Well, you heard the men. They just talk about the women. I've been practicing my grown-up voice. The men only talk about the women when they want the women to know what they're talking about. How do you know that? I've heard what men talk about when women ain't around. Are y'all even counting? A little voice asks from behind the wastebassin. 65, Tempe yells. Giggles, swishing grass, the curling and uncurling of little legs in tight places, and then silence. The silence of little children waiting for something good and terrible all at once. Gotcha makes little hearts beat faster. Well, what do they talk about? I ask. Sex. Told ya. And politics and religion and war and freedom. All that. And more when they get riled up. Is that what you do at night? Go down and listen to the hired hands talk? Sometimes. The words fall out and I can't do nothing to get them back. Tempe looks down when she answers. Tempe can't hold her lies any more than old Mrs. can hold her liquor. Flash of brown skin and dingy denim. Ready or not, here we come, Tempe shouts. Watson, long brown legs and thin bony arms flail and is already halfway to the porch. He's panting and sweating. His chest pumps hard. I just watch it, glistening. Run. Tempe's long, shapely legs carry her to within inches of Watson. They don't look like she's hardly breathing. She cuts through the yard with hardly no effort at all. It don't seem fair. Tempe can catch him anytime she wants. She knows the land and made the rules. Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. I tap each little head quickly, dashing from one to the next so I can turn back to the race. There are no tears this time. The little hearts race along with Watson's. Run. Watson is just a few strides ahead of Tempe. If she leans forward just a little more, she'll have him. If not, he'll reach the porch, sanctuary, seconds before her. He slows, and even from the back of his head, I know he's grinning. He zags sharply. You're running the wrong way. I can't get the words out fast enough, but then I see. He isn't running the wrong way at all. The women must have heard the commotion. Armed with broomsticks, they take to the porch in synchronized annoyance. They stand guard. Around back, the men have already stopped talking about the war, escape, and freedom. They're out front, gruff voices whispering. Run. Tempe must have seen it then. We all do. Watson isn't running for the porch. Tempe stops. She stands still, whispering, run, 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 along with everybody else. Watson never stops running. I wish he had taken me with him. Thank you. And now, Keisha.
Thank you, Yvonne. That was an amazing reading. Remembered is such a powerful story and is so relevant today, even though it's about the past. Supposedly, it's not really the past. I have lots of ideas about that in terms of time isn't linear. But I'm going to read from my debut book, No Heaven for Good Boys. Sort of the elevator pitch is, it is a modern day Oliver Twist story. But my Oliver is African and Muslim. And these children are I write about these children in Senegal. I lived there for 4 years in West Africa, and I fictionalized basically what is a current day human rights crises. So as I read this, these children are still in Senegal being forced into basically modern day slavery, which is really interesting, the connection between all of our 3 books. And the book sort of follows the children in Dakar, and I got to know clusters of them when I lived in Senegal, or when I lived in Dakar specifically. And I would buy them bananas. I was their banana girl because at first I was broke. And then when I started working with Oxfam Great Britain as their communications officer, I later, was like the broke Oprah in Dakar for the Taliban, buying them jelly sandals and pizza and burgers. I'm like, burger for you and coca for you. They call Coca-Cola, coca, and bananas, banane in French. So, the kids really got to know me and we would recognize one another. And it was just all about just giving them moments, slivers and moments just in their day of kindness and love, and that someone actually saw them. So I'm going to actually read from you chapter 5, and it's in the middle. I have 2 sections in here that I really like, but I'll read for you basically my main character, his name is Ibrahima. He is 6 years old. The other thing, another little tidbit, are many Taliban are between the ages of 3 years old and 15. And, you know, they live and sleep in subpar conditions. And then they're out begging for about 12 hours a day in the car, no shoes, oftentimes not fully clothed, just an old t-shirt. And they stay in clusters for safety. But I was also interested when I told this story to just not show what the boys are going through on the streets of the country, but also how did my particular character, how did Ibrahima become a Taliban? And I'm going to read from you the scene in which his future teacher finds him. It's the mailman. All right. So a melange of orange, yellow, and purple hues reflect off big cumulus clouds as the sun sets on the horizon. The small crab Ibrahima has been toying with turns to him, its claws set to attack. He calls out to Musa to come see, but gets no response. He looks up. His friend is nowhere in sight. When he looks back down, the crab is gone. He could hear them all talking just a while ago off in the distance, but all that fills his ears now is the incoming tide. He stands up to see if Musa is crouching down somewhere, but the beach is empty. The path in front of the rocks and the dune he had crossed earlier is now completely swallowed up by the sea. He is the only one there. Musa, nothing. Aisha, silence. Fatu, Binta. The tide is coming in fast. He looks up at the sky and frowns. His body begins to sweat even as the cool ocean breeze washes over him. Being on the beach at night brings bad luck, and it's getting dark. The beach is the only place evil spirits can sneak onto land without being seen. They can walk right along beside you without you even knowing it, his father once told him. Ibrahima looks to his left. The dune looms high above him. He looks to his right. The coast stretches on for what seems like eternity. If he goes in that direction, he could be walking farther away from his village, and he's never been down that end of the beach before. In front of him lies the rocky wall that encases the coast. The tide slaps at the back of his ankles. He walks forward and tries to climb the dune, but his feet sink into the soft sand, and he slides down the steep incline. Trying again, he drops down to his knees in an attempt to crawl, but he ends up face down, clutching handfuls of soft earth. He lies sprawled out on his stomach in defeat. What are you doing? A voice rings out through the noise of the crashing waves. Ibrahima rolls over to find a man standing behind him. He had just looked down the coast and hadn't seen anyone before. Didn't you hear me? The man shifts his weight. Answer up, boy. Ibrahima stands and looks up at the man wearing a black bubu, his head wrapped in a matching turban. I'm trying to get home. Where do you live? Ibrahima points towards the dune. Come with me. I'll show you a way back. The man turns to head down the coast away from his village. Ibrahima doesn't move. He doesn't trust the stranger. If you stay here, the tide will gobble you up and you'll live out the rest of your life as a fish, running from the fisherman who wants to eat you. The swelling tide, angry and aggressive, crashes against Ibrahima's legs. He looks towards the dune one more time, hoping to see Musa or his sisters, but he knows they are gone, so then turns and follows the man down the beach. What's your name? The man asks. Ibrahima. How old are you? 6. Ibrahima holds his hands up, fingers spread wide. That's a good age. They walk for what feels like a long time before reaching a set of deteriorating cement steps leading to the top of the cliff. Be careful, the stranger says, standing aside for Ibrahima to ascend first. Ibrahima uses both hands to climb the tall stairs, relieved to see the crest of roofs in the distance. The two of them walk toward the unfamiliar small village of quiet, tin-roofed shanties to the main road. I'm sure your family must be worried about you by now. Just find a taxi to get you back faster, huh? The man hails a horse-drawn carriage or a horse-drawn wagon. He lifts Ibrahima onto the back and then hoists himself up. Ibrahima's body bounces to the rhythm of the horse trotting across the dirt road, the smell of manure lingering from the day's errands. Hay scratches at the backs of his legs. He looks up at the man, but with the evening settling in, he can only make out the silhouette of his face. His eyelids hang heavy, but are shocked open with every rock the wagon stumbles over. Ibrahima jumps to attention at the sight of the mosque his family attends. "I live here!" The man shouts to the driver to stop. Once his feet are planted firmly back on the ground, Ibrahima runs down the sandy path all the way to his house. Barreling through the front door, he's greeted by a chorus of relief voices. "Ibrahima, alhamdulillah, my baby, where have you been?" his mother exclaims. "Where did you run off to?" his sisters ask over one another. "We thought you were with us. Musa said you were together, and then when he looked up, you were gone. Don't do that again." "The water got really high. I couldn't get to you," Ibrahima says on the verge of tears. "Fatu, don't yell at your brother. You should have kept a closer eye on him. The one thing I ask you to do, just one thing, watch your brother." "But Mama, I was watching him," Fatu says with a pout. And I'm gonna end there. But I really, Ibrahima has 3 sisters and I love them. Lots of energy between the 3 of them, but thank you. Thanks.
You know what? Reading your book, I've cried so many times. And
I
one, I think, did you? I was wondering about it, and I think that's one thing. If y'all don't mind, if I start off with a question, and just reading your books, I think both of them, they were emotional experiences. There were times when I would laugh, as well, and so it would kind of like lighten it up. And then times when I was just thinking, and other times I was just like holding my breath or in tears. And I'm curious about, I know what it kind of took me through emotionally, the terrain as a reader. And I'm just curious about that emotional, I guess, journey that it took you through as writers.
You want to go first, Melanie?
No, sure. Yeah, I mean, it is an emotional journey, and actually, Yvonne, it's interesting you asked that question, because in reading your book, I mean, there is such emotion in yours, and I sort of had that same question: was what, how did you manage to get through that journey? And I was thinking about my own, but I think at the time for me, as I was writing the book, there were so many headlines that really reflected a lot of what I was writing about. There were so many, shootings, police, brutality. I mean, there were just so many, news reports that were coming out that I sort of felt this urgency to get the story written, because it just felt so timely and so part of what I was living in. And even now, since the book has been out, I mean, it's just constant. But there is sort of this feeling of sort of heightened sense of panic, I think, that sort of took hold as I was kind of writing. And it was sort of partly, I've got to finish this because this is what's happening in the world right now. But there's also that anguish around, oh my God, this is happening in the world right now. And finding that balance between this sense of anguish and being able to step back and look at it objectively. I spent a lot of times walking in the woods by myself, and stopped listening to the news, because there is that moment of, feeling almost like all is lost in some respects. But I kept saying to myself, I have to find something good. Like I have to, as I'm looking at this family dynamic, I have to find a way of bringing these characters together, because if I don't, and there were certainly plenty moments where I kept thinking, what's the point? Like, it's all, the world is coming to an end. But I think what really helped me keep going was that sense that the family has to come back together again at some point.
I think, yeah, both your books touch so heavily on my actual personal life. And I know, and of course, like as a Black person, a Black woman, my history, is a slave history, but our oral history on my mother's side is very strong. And my great-great-grandmother was a runaway slave who made it to freedom. And we lived very long in our family. So I grew up with my great-grandmother, who was the first generation to be born out of slavery, and I'm fourth, which, you would think, oh, slavery was so long ago, it's like 10 generations. It's like, no, it's much shorter than you think. And in your case, Melanie, in 2007, my cousin was tasered to death by the police.
Oh
And,
my gosh.
it's like families of like all this trauma. And when I was writing No Heaven for Good Boys, it's interesting, someone asked me at one point, Keisha, you were a tourist. Technically, I was an expat. I wasn't a tourist in Senegal. I lived there for 4 years. I was an expat. I was very cognizant about sort of like responsible tourism while I was there. It's really important to respect a culture, especially as an American. You need to be cognizant of how you drive up the prices. So instead of just paying a taxi driver, 3 times the amount because you can afford it and it's so cheap, you really need to take the time to negotiate a fair price so that they won't stop picking up locals, which was happening in some cases. So now all of a sudden you have Senegalese taxi drivers that won't pick up Senegalese people. And I'm like, that's too similar to New York, where Black people can't get a taxi, And so they asked me, how did so many people live in West Africa? So many people live in Senegal from all different backgrounds. Why did you end up writing about these children? It's weird because a couple of people have mentioned them in memoirs, like young American women, like this is so wrong. And then I come along and I dedicate an entire book, and they are the main character. There is no American savior in this story or Western savior, because they're not, no one has saved them. So how could I write a fictional account of something that doesn't exist? Which is, again, sort of very similar between our 3 books, because they're all fictional accounts of very real things in our world. But I have to say, it was extremely hard to write this. I did not realize until recently that I was in psychotherapy while I was writing it. And I wasn't in therapy to write the book. I was in therapy for all kinds of other stuff, all kinds of other trauma. And what had initiated it was a very toxic and hostile work, a job that I had had in New York. And I was having thoughts of self-harm. And so I, at work, and so found a therapist. And then I got fired and I had already started writing and I found my way to No Heaven. And I'm also a Buddhist practitioner, and had gone during the writing of this, was doing a lot of like silent meditation retreats. I was very active with my Buddhist community in New York Insight Meditation Center. And now in hindsight, when I look back, like how in the world did I actually write this? I realized I sought support, because when you cry as a reader, I cried as a writer and would have to take time away. Or there were some scenes that when I realized those were the scenes, that was what I had to write, it took me weeks to go back to the manuscript to even write it. So yeah.
Thank you. I know for me, writing, it was an emotional journey, and it made me feel, I think, in ways that I hadn't felt in quite a while. And part of it was, I think you just immerse yourself into the characters. And for me, it's when I'm writing, I write out loud first. So I need to hear it. I need to kind of like feel it in that way and emotionally connect with it. And then I can put it on the page. And so there would be times when I was sitting there crying, like I knew that Tempe was going to die. And she was the first character I met. So she came to me, and I feel like it was kind of fully formed and just kind of mannerisms and ways that she might speak. And I wanted to get to know her. So I wrote to get to know her and to, to figure out what was her story and what were those silences she was keeping. It was really useful that I was writing it for my PhD. So I had to submit something every 2 weeks. It didn't have to be fiction, but it could be like around the writing of it or around the other research that was going on. But so every 2 weeks I knew I had to, to be writing something. But there were times when I would be writing, and I remember like I was getting to know Tempe, and I felt like, this is her book, and I, in my head, I'm thinking she's gonna make it to the end. I don't know the ending. I didn't know the ending yet. But then one day I was sitting there and I saw this image just of her in a doorway of a house, and the house was on fire. It was her silhouette. And I knew then that there was no way she could survive that. I hadn't written her into a fire, but just, how it kind of comes to you, you kind of just see it, and you just know that, yeah, that's part of her story. And it's a significant part of her story. And that's probably her end. And I cried because like, I didn't want that for her, but it just seemed like that was her truth. And that was, what she was on. And I do remember my daughter saying, like, I was writing at home, and she was like, are you okay? What's going on? And I was like, oh my gosh, Tempe is dying. And she's like looking around like, what? And then I'm like, Tempe, the character in my book, like she's dying. And she's like, aren't you killing her? And I'm like, no, my gosh, like, how could you suggest such a thing? I said she is dying, not I'm murdering her. We're like, who do you think I am? So it was really interesting how the process of it it wasn't me organically saying, I didn't plot and say like, at this point, she's going to die. So it was hard because it was taking me in places emotionally I hadn't expected to go. And I wasn't navigating that journey. But it was, yeah, it was.
I love hearing you talk about that, because I have a similar process where you get to know the characters as you write them.
Yep.
And it's not necessarily that you sort of have this whole plan and that, but you're sort of discovering who they are and what their story is. So yeah, oh my gosh, that's hard. No, if you're not a writer, or at least a writer of fiction for sure, it's hard to, I think, really understand that.
Oh, I know, she was worried about me. Like she was worried about my mental health. I'm sure, like just the idea that I'm going like, this is happening in this story and I'm not in control of it. Because I do remember, Melanie, I don't know about you, but I know like at Hopkins, I feel like there was a point where I felt like I was in control of the narrative. Or like in these characters where like, they do what I say they're going to do, and that's just the end of the story. And I remember going to Italy and being asked like, so who's the main character and what does she want? And at the time I was writing this really clever book that thinly disguised my life. And it was these 3 characters that were all the main character until I was out, and like 2 were female, 1 was a male. And so when they said, and what does she want? It was like, oh, okay, well, so clearly they didn't think that he was the main character. And they were all really like versions of me. But it made me have to look at like, wow, like if I'm really the main character of that story, what do I want? And I think for me, that was kind of that turning point in my writing where it started like, it's not about me. And it's okay that I don't know where they're going to go, because their journey is actually not my journey. And I might not like the things that they do any more than I like the things that real people do. But I get to know them. It's if I don't spend that time with them on the page, getting to know them, then I don't know a thing about them. And when I try to force them into stories and places where I want them to go, the story they want to tell is so much more interesting.
I also find that if I try to force my own will onto the character, the story stops for me. Like I just can't. People talk about, what is it called? writer's block. I'm like, writer's block in my case is when either I'm afraid of what's going to happen, or I'm trying to push something on the character and the character's like, that's not me. So this idea that, and I don't, maybe this is different for genre writing, right? But when you're in a literary space and it's character based, and maybe, I don't know if writers do that, other writers might do this, but manipulating or doing something, or, these things that happen to the character is not manipulative, when you're truly writing them. And it's really interesting because I also write memoir, and it's just as emotional also, the sort of journey. And you also would like to be manipulative, and not show things or hide, but that full story, the full sort of narrative, this weaving of the web, it's like weaving a web. A spider can't just skip a spot, like, this is too hard, he's like, look, this is the full web, and there's not some big gaping hole. He didn't like make a cone, he's just like, this is what it is. And as you start weaving this narrative, it takes on a life of its own. And then we're on the journey also. Yeah.
That's my thing with writer's block. One of it is that I have 3 kids. I can't actually afford writer's block. So if I sit down and I have like, nothing for me gets a story written faster than having a deadline. I'm deadline driven, but that's also because when I meet the deadline, there are a few better feelings than having met a deadline, rewarding myself for meeting a deadline. But when there's something I feel like, if I sit down and I'm going, wow, I wonder what's going to happen, and it feels a block, it's 100% Yvonne block. It's not like random writer's block. It's like, no, I'm specific. I'm you, the writer, blocking this story, because that's me going, wouldn't it be great if these 2 characters walk into here and then this happens and then this. And I can sometimes I'm too stubborn. I can sit there going, no, this story it's going to work. So there's this couple and they want to do this, but the one doesn't want to do that. And then like, I'm writing it. And if I spend the time to think like, what's making the story not work? It's always me. It's always me saying, this is what you're going to do. And I'm going to force you here. And them going, you know what, actually, I don't even like them. Like, they're not my type. Like, I would never be in this situation because actually I'm not even going to be in a relationship with them. And I'm going, oh no, you are, because this is your 9th anniversary. And they're like, actually, it just doesn't work. So for me, I do feel 100% whenever there's a blocking of a story, it's always me saying, well, this is what I want to happen. And the story going, there is no logical way or reason or rationale behind it. And it just won't flow that way. But if I step back and I go, fine, yeah, you all do you. What do you want to do? The story they want to tell is so much better and it's less painful. Like, not that it's not emotional, but painful in the terms of like me sitting there going, I've written 10 words today. But like, it just flows out because it's like, that's the story in its organic form or whatever that's about.
Yeah, that's true. And it's, for me, if I'm not listening to the characters, if I stop listening, then I'm lost. So I know, okay, I need to sit down for a minute and just tune in to their voices, and that invariably sets me forward again.
Do you have a trick for tuning back in?
Well, like I had said, I spend a lot of time in the woods. So I think sort of being in that sort of natural environment, like really literally removing myself from, computer, paper, everything, and being in an environment where my mind can just kind of, sort of go with the flow of where I am. I'm listening to the birds and, trying to sort of be in that moment of just nature. And I find when I come back from that, my mind has sort of cleared out and I'm able to sort of tune in. Other ways, sometimes listening to music will help me, if it's at nighttime and I can't, just wander down to the trail. I might listen to some music if it sort of sets a particular mood that I'm trying to tap into. That I find can be very helpful.
Yeah. What about you, Keisha?
I do a combination of things. Also, I know it might seem weird, or I think other writers do this. I'll clean and make sure things are not cluttered in the space. And meditate. Oftentimes, I find if I sit and meditate for 30 minutes or an hour, the slate is sort of like reset. The other thing I do is I dream about them. I think about them like as I'm going to sleep. I find, and every manuscript is different. Some characters are living during the day, if that makes sense. They'll come during the day. Other narratives come at night, and will only show up at night. I read something, I don't know if it was particularly about Einstein, but I read that like around 3, 4 a.m. seems to be this sort of clairvoyant time. And I think, I don't know, I can't remember if it was,
I've heard that too. Yeah.
yeah,
It's like a magical hour of the veil is very thin.
it is. And so like going to bed really early and then waking up around that time, because our bodies naturally will wake up. I know I need my bladder. I drink so much water. My bladder's like, you're gonna wake up every 3 hours like you're an infant. I'm just like, and I know the ways through my house with my eyes closed. That doesn't even matter. I don't need to turn any lights on. But I do find my problem is I'm often going to bed at 3 a.m. And that does tend to be a clairvoyant time. And so I will just lay there and I will start thinking about my characters. And I'm writing something right now, and I've taken a few days off doing some other work, and my character is just like, she had me, first of all, I'm laughing at 3:30 in the morning, ha 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 ha, like while I'm laying in bed, because like something, like she showed me something, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that's so funny, and I'm like, oh, her mother shows up to this scene. Thanks, that's what I was missing. You know what I mean? Because like now there's going to be this conflict because her mother has like excommunicated her, but she's going to show up for this special situation. And so, yeah, like I feel like, I tell people sometimes one of the ways to connect is go read your last 5 pages that you wrote. And then just go sit and think about them, dream about them as you would like a friend or a lover. I have some thoughts about like the obsessiveness of being an artist, of being a writer. Like if we didn't have something that was obsessive about us, we wouldn't be able to write these works. And so I'm like, why would I not then be a bit obsessive in the way that I love? So it's a whole nother thread that I've
Well, I have another writer friend. We talk about it. We're falling in love. When we come up with a new, project, new story, it's that falling in love. Like we are obsessed with it. We can't stop thinking about the characters and about, the story. And it's like being in love, we're just, obsessive about it. But I think sitting in the dark, either laying in the dark or being in darkness brings on, in quiet darkness for me can often bring on the characters, and I can hear them very clearly and see them. And that definitely, so when you were talking about, being in bed and yeah, oftentimes I would go to bed and then suddenly they'd start talking to me and I'd be like, okay, let me put the light on and get my notebook.
Yeah. You're like, I'm tired. I don't want to talk right now.
Yeah, I'm tired, but okay. Because I know if I don't, I'll forget it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that the worst? You'll get this idea or this. I know if I go to sleep with a problem, if I have a question I'm grappling with, I can go to sleep with it and then I can wake up with the answer. And I find like it's a wonderful treat to be like, oh yeah, I got it. But if I don't write it down or capture it in some way or record it, then it's like hours later, I'm kind of rethinking through that. Now, I know I had this problem because I remember the problem. I just don't remember what that solution was. Mm-hmm. I know I need to like, I'm gonna try this 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock thing, just to kind of see what's going on for me at 3 o'clock. I can tell you it's been ages since I've been up at 3 on purpose. Like it's just, I mean, I do remember like a time when I was coming in at 3, but now I'm like, oh my gosh, 3 o'clock.
Right.
You know
Just
how
drink
like,
lots of water before you go to bed.
and then I won't be able to just, all right, so I'm gonna try it. I'll let you both know
Your
how it
bladder will
works.
wake you up.
Yeah. Yes. Just drink like literally. And I'm drinking water now. Like just drink a cup of water, or tea is even worse. Tea will
Yeah.
definitely get you up within like 3 hours.
All right, so that's going to be my new routine. I'm going to try it. For a while, I tried the getting up early in the morning, because you know how everyone talks about like they get up at the crack of dawn. And for a while, I felt like, oh my gosh, Yvonne, like you need to be getting up at 5 in the morning. What are you doing sleeping all night? It's, you know, like all the greats got up at 5 in the morning, and they and then I'm thinking, one, I don't even like that as a time, like 5 in the morning. If I'm up at 5 in the morning, I'm grumpy. And I'm like irritated. So if I sit down and type, it's going to be like, and they died. And like doesn't even matter what I was writing. It could be a kid's story and everybody's going to die, because
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not happy about it. And I don't think I can be my creative best if I'm sitting there resenting the fact that I'm up and it's still dark. But I think 3 to 4, not getting up and typing, but laying in bed and like just kind of like seeing what kind of like, I might be able to try that, because I know I can get back to sleep. Whereas if I get up at 5, I'm up for the day, because I feel like I like to start my day doing something I love. But actually, when I'm telling myself, no, honey, you can get up at 10 in the morning, 11, like, do you know what I mean? Like if I'm not like working that day, I can get up whatever time. And if I start my day with writing, then I'm already doing something I love. And there's no reason for me to torture myself at 5 to do it.
Yeah.
I'm with you there.
I think also, everything isn't for everybody. I think
Yeah.
it wasn't a song. But I also think about those writers, and I'm like, did they start out at 5 in the morning, or as they had gotten more solidified in their career and they weren't juggling so many people? I know Toni had her full-time job and she had her kids, but she was already waking up early for her kids. She just woke up an hour earlier, if that makes sense. But for a lot of the other greats, I'm like, you're at a different point in your life where you're more solidified, you're not juggling a whole bunch of jobs, and that you're probably living in a less stressful environment, and that works for you. And I think we don't hear about the writers who don't wake up at 5 a.m. Like we're very quiet because somehow we're not like,
But aren't they all dead? All
Yeah.
the ones who claim to get up at 5 in the morning. I'm like, and where did that get you?
Yeah. But they say also as you get older, your sleep patterns change. So if you're going to bed at 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and that's normal for you, then of course it'll be easier for you to wake up at 5. 5 is normal. For me, I try to go to bed at like 10:30, like, at one point when I was working full time, and I'll lay there till 3 and then be pissed because I'm not thinking about my characters. I'm stressed out about trying to go to sleep. So I'm just like, I'm just gonna go with the flow here, and it's okay. Just tell me what you want. I'll just do what you want. I'm not the writer. I'm a vessel. I'm on this other thing. We're only microbes anyway, doing what our biota wants from us. I'm just like, I have too much yeast in my stomach, and all of a sudden they're like, we want ice cream. And I'm like, I don't even want ice cream. I don't like it. Why am I buying?
If I've learned anything, it's that there is no sort of ideal. It's whatever works for you.
Yeah.
I'm not a morning person, so I know getting up at 5 in the morning, it's not going to be beneficial for me because, like you say, Yvonne, I'm just going to be grumpy. I'm going to spend that time at the end of the day before I go to sleep, or, take a few minutes when I wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning and write my little notes. And then I just kind of weave in, where my writing time sort of fits depending on what's happening that day.
Yeah.
But people ask all the time, what's your writing schedule? And I'm like, I don't actually really have one. It's kind of whenever I can make it happen.
I think I started being less precious about when I write, but also where, because I write out loud. Like I need to hear it. And I'm sure it has something to do, like psychologically, there's something where if I don't hear it, I don't feel it. But so that means when I'm writing, I do have to write out loud. And often I might be writing a murder mystery. And so, it's not always pleasant. But I used to feel like, how everybody was talking about going to Starbucks and going wherever, and they write in cafes. And I wasn't doing it because I was thinking, like, wow, what an inconvenience to other people if I'm sitting here going, and then and then so and so did whatever, and then they died, or whatever. And I'm thinking how, like, how stressful that might be for other people. But then, so I teach in Sheffield, and for a while I was commuting from Lancaster to Sheffield, and it's a 2.5-hour train ride. It's actually two different train rides. So you take a break in the middle to wait on a platform, which is always the busiest one in like Manchester. But all that time I'd be like wishing I could write. And then I'd be on a train and people would be going, between you and I, so-and-so is losing his job. Between you and I, so-and-so is cheating on their taxes. Between you, and I'm like, it's not between you and them. Like they'd be on the phone, but it was between them and everyone else on the train. So it was all of us. And no, they were not the least bit inconvenienced by the fact that I was listening to their trade secrets, their tax, evasion, their whatever they were doing. Like they weren't inconvenienced about it. And I thought, you know what? The only one inconvenienced by me not writing on the train is me. At the end of the day, nobody was going off. We kept her from writing. So then I just started like writing. And now, of course, we're in the pandemic. So like the whole training situation is different. But like I was really, I think, happy that when I reached that point where I can say, nope, I'm just going to pull this out and I'm going to write. And I'm just going to, because it wasn't like I was yelling, they died. It was just the act of it doing it. But I just freed myself from saying like, oh, you can only write in the, at the crack of dawn in your living room by with the moon, like, whatever. Now you're right. It's wherever I can grab that moment. That's where I'm taking it.
So I'm going to jump in. We're going to wrap up in a second. But before we do, someone just had a quick question for you, Yvonne, which was, how old are your kids? Because for them, trying to write early and then getting interrupted by the school routine is no fun.
I do remember, so when they were younger, now they're older. My youngest is 16 now, which, I mean, of course, you're still interrupted by, different things with the day. And now I guess it's even more, it's less of a time, like it's more anytime now. But one thing I do try to do is, even if I'm writing something, is to take that time to be like, hey, is everything okay? Like, what do you need? And even if he knows that even if he's coming in, and unless he's like bleeding or something's going on, like, horribly wrong, that I'm going to at least take a minute to finish that sentence. But I do always try to be like, hey, is everything okay? Because when I look at how I want to be remembered, so it's not necessarily that I was a writer, but I want my kids to remember they were loved. So I do try to take those moments. But the school run used to be the best, like one of my favorite times of the day. So I would be one of those ones when people were saying, can we have a meeting at 3:00? I'm like, no, because I had to pick it. Like, what else do you know happens at 3:00? So like, I would try to prioritize, like, work my day around the school run. It's not always easy, especially because when you're mid idea. And for me, what I think made that a little more possible was, instead of me being like, I have to write it down or type it, because I can never read my writing again. So if I handwrite it and I write it down, I don't know what it says. So I would record myself. So I would walk to my son's school. And in that way, if I had an idea, I could just be like, oh, and then this happened. And then I could, flesh it out when I got home. It was, I think, challenging, especially when everyone was younger, to balance that time. Like, but I was never just, I was momming and working, and I was studying and I was writing. So like trying to do different things at different times.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right.
I hope that answers the question.
I think it does. I'm going to be the party pooper. It's time to wrap things up. I want to thank you both for a wonderful discussion. And thanks to everyone who tuned in. You can also check out future virtual events from the Virginia Festival of the Book at vabook.org. I want to thank you both, Yvonne and Melanie, for such a great and dynamic conversation, and also to the audience for joining us and being, engaging, and, just making this such a great hour in the day and in the week. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Keisha, too. This was amazing. It was such a delight to talk to you both and to hear your books, and again, and to just be able to immerse and spend some time with you and your beautiful characters and books and your voices and your information. Thank you both.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.